We spoke recently about people on the internet doing outrageous things for clout and clicks and ultimately money. But now there's been a really tragic turn of events. This happened in Italy. It was some people and they basically, race Lamborghinis on the streets, do sort of like little stunts and things like that. Um, Perhaps the inevitable happened. They were in a collision with another car and a 6-year-old child didn't make it. What particularly has outraged people is at the scene they were going, "No, don't worry about it, don't worry about it. We'll sort them out. We'll give them lots of money." And the fact is, this video has made money. I mean, a lot of the videos have been taken down, but it was still monetized. Um, so obviously, we'll see what happens, with developments there. But one interesting thing is, this channel was sponsored by Sony, as apparently it's pronounced according to some guy I met from Sony. They provided all the cameras, and they obviously had been plugging the channel and going, "This is really exciting. This is great." Now they have since deleted every comment that they can to disassociate themselves. But in terms of like liability here, both civil and criminal, what might happen? Now, obviously, this is going to speak about this happened in Italy, and I can only really speak about sort of English law. Although just checking around with some Italian lawyer friends, I mean, the principles are very, very similar. They've obviously got different names for things. But the general concepts seem to apply. So I thought, I'll discuss it in the English context. What happens? Does that company have any responsibility? Can they be said to have, encouraged this, or that they or facilitated it, or even taken part in it? In England and Wales, we have something called, being an accessory. Being an accessory to a crime, the terms we use are aiding, abetting, counselling, or procuring. Aiding is, physically just being there and helping, like, holding the shotgun or being the getaway driver. Abetting, again, it's something that you tend to do while you are there, but it's like, come on, let's mug in, let's do this. The idea is that you're on the scene. Counselling is, as the name suggests, providing advice about a crime, but it can also involve encouragement. But generally speaking, it's assisting prior to the fact. And procuring is, again, that's more in the path, prior to the act. It's like, I would like you to go out and rob that bank. So that if you're convicted as an accessory, accessories are convicted as what are called principals. So you appear on the indictment as if you are, just you're in the dock with the sort of people who actually carried out the main crime, even if your assistance was, before or after. Accessory after the fact, as we hear in TV, and that is a real thing. Usually, it's charged those things like perverting the course of justice, because it's like hiding evidence for people, and other offences, handling stolen goods. So, the idea of accessory over the fact, usually people charged with specific offences. We've also got, we used to have a thing called incitement. That's actually gone now as a term, but it's an old common law thing. An incitement was encouraging somebody to commit a crime. Not necessarily, a specific person. It could be, to the public at large. Hey, everybody go out and let's have a riot next weekend or something like that. That's been replaced by 3 offences in the Serious Crimes Act. They all more or less cover the same thing, though, which is somehow encouraging somebody to either commit a specific offence, one of a type of offence, or any offence generally. And it's interesting because I have to be really careful with that myself, because I do talks for animal rights activists about before protests, and I have to make it very clear that I have to think that while I'm doing this, are people more likely to go out and commit a crime because I am advising them on, here's what the crimes are, here's all the considerations, here's what happens at the police station, here's how you might want to deal with the interview, here's a list of useful contacts, solicitors who deal with this sort of thing. I actually did it once. It was really embarrassing because I was doing a talk like this, and I jokingly said, it's ironic that while I'm lecturing about Section 43 of the Serious Crimes Act, I might be breaking it, but hey, let's keep it between ourselves. And then somebody went, "You do know we're live streaming this." So it could be one of those party videos. But I actually say at the beginning, I say, "Look, I'm not encouraging anybody here." And actually, that's something I genuinely feel with activism. And I don't normally talk about personal feelings on these sort of things because I just want to try and be as objective as possible. But I am very, aware of, one of my jobs is saying, "Look, here's the consequences. not just for you, but also the people you encourage. Because if you encourage some young kid, and then they get a criminal record and they can't get into university because of it, because there's a 1 year studying abroad and they can't get a visa, or somebody whose immigration status is vulnerable. And we've just seen that with one of the, I think, Just Stop Oil people, where they got sentenced of more than 12 months, is going to be deported. And I say, you've got to be aware of these sorts of things. So I actually think, I discourage people, but I have to make sure that I don't cross the line and anything I do actually make somebody commit a crime that they wouldn't otherwise have done. So this is the sort of thing we've got to look at. So yeah, so you've got your basic, being an accessory, which is sort of assisting, with the crime either at the scene or before or after. And then you've got incitement type offences, which is going out there and saying, hey, why don't you do this? Wouldn't it be a great idea? So, could a company supplying cameras to a channel like this, it's certainly something to consider, that would these people have been quite as reckless if they weren't getting this sort of gear and getting all these sorts of promotions? I mean, no doubt Sony's argument would be, well, look, they're going to do this anyway. So, the mere fact that we provided the equipment hasn't changed anything in terms of causation. Similarly with civil liability, we have a concept in English law called negligence, which is basically, have you done something that causes somebody harm? And the test is, you've got to be something called a duty of care, a breach of the duty of care, and losses as a consequence of that breach. Okay, so the duty of care, how do you establish that if you don't know somebody? Well, the test is, it's what we call the neighbourhood principle. It's who might be affected by my actions. And if, the classic example is you're driving on the road, you owe duty of care to all other road users because your actions might affect them. So, it's a very variable thing. Every case turns on its own merits. And the breach of that duty of care, to use the motoring example again, failing to drive to a reasonable standard, that's a breach. Okay? And, if you have an accident then and somebody suffers a loss, hopefully you just bump their car, so it's a financial loss, but you injure somebody, they've suffered a loss. But it's got to be consequential. Let's say, I'm driving on the road and I drive absolutely appallingly. Not a totally hypothetical situation, but nothing happens. Luckily nobody's injured. Well, there's no cause of action there because there wasn't a loss. So, we don't have this sort of idea of reckless endangerment like they do in some US states. So that's the situation there. Is you could you argue that this camera company owes the duty of care? And you would argue and say, well, look, you can see it is reasonably foreseeable that your actions may have some sort of influence. I'm not going into the merits of that, how good an argument is, but that's an argument that could be made. It wouldn't surprise me, and as we all say, lots of cases settle out of court, and not necessarily because of the merits of the case. If Sony get enough bad PR out of this, they may well do a little sort of like, here's a lot of money, please don't talk about us. But the fact is that these people, the actual people who crashed the car, offered money. That's gone down really, really badly. So that's something to throw into the mix there, because being seen to just, especially for a multi-billion-dollar company, just to pay somebody off, it seems very disparaging. And for a lot of time, it's not about the money. We always say to clients when they say, oh, it's not about the money, it's the principle. So like in 2 years' time, you won't be saying that, when you've lost your house, and you've been living this day in, day out. But I think for a family in this position, who would blame them? But yeah, I just thought, I just mentioned that, because this is this worrying concern that people are just going out there for more and more clicks and more likes and more clout, and where will it end? Hopefully this might sort of make people just calm down a bit.